Welcome to the Returnee Report. On this show, we share the stories of African diaspora who returned to the continent. I'm your host, Akaliza Keza, and this is a message from home. You can find the Returnee Report on many of your favorite platforms. You can also follow us on social media at Returnee Report. That's at RETURNEE Report. All right, let's get on with the show. Our guest today is Stella. She grew up in Rwanda before traveling to Germany, where she studied and worked for roughly 8 years. She has a Master of Science in Electrical and Communications Engineering, and she worked in Germany for several years before she returned home. She was recently appointed as the Kigali Operations Manager for Norskin Foundation, with a vision of creating East Africa's biggest hub for entrepreneurship and innovation. She volunteers in activities that empower women to join STEM, and she's passionate about building the next generation of innovators in Africa. For fun, she enjoys traveling, hiking, and tennis. Talk about an all-rounder. As with all the guests this season, I asked her 3 questions regarding African identity. At this point, I and you perhaps may have noticed a theme in the answers from the guests. For Africans who spent their early childhood, let's say the development years in Africa, their conviction in their identity as an African is quite unshakable. Let's see if the theme continues with Stella. The first question is, do you consider yourself an African? And in your opinion, what identifies a person as an African?
Yes, I do consider myself an African. And what identifies me as an African is, first of all, I'm a human being. And a human being who has their roots in Rwanda being on the African continent. So for me, it's as simple as that. But of course, you could start looking at the physical appearance, but I don't think that would be entirely true because of different external factors that sometimes you find people who look like Africans physically, but they're not identified as Africans. So you can find many, of course, in the South American continent and other continents, but this is due to external factors, political factors, and geographical factors, so and other factors altogether. So for me, it's as simple as a human being who has their roots in Rwanda, and Rwanda being on the African continent, and an African continent that has diverse and rich culture and history.
Okay, can you tell me a bit more about what led you to finally return to Africa?
I think for me, I didn't actually think of that I'm returning to Africa. It was more of I'm returning to Rwanda. I'm going back home. So it was, for me, the decisions were just as simple as going back home. And also, of course, the social fabric of our communities and society here back home in Rwanda. It's more conducive, but also feeling that that you're at home. It's not the same as being in a foreign country where you constantly need to fit in or constantly need to be aware that you're actually a foreigner. So it's that feeling of being at home, but also being able to contribute to the development of my country and the African continent.
The third question is, do you have any plans to leave in the future, and what would influence your decision to stay or to return?
Honestly, I don't know because I don't know what the future holds. And as much as I'm an African and consider myself as an African, but also I consider myself as a global citizen. So I don't feel like I need to be pinned down at one particular location. So for me, if an opportunity presents itself to leave Africa, and I find it's a good decision to do, then I'll do it. But right now I am here and I don't have plans to leave, and I'm still enjoying it. And if I would describe what influences my decision to stay is mostly the challenges. So the African continent has a lot of challenges, and challenges always present opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity here on the continent of Africa, and the African continent has a lot of young people, and that means a lot. So it means consumers, it means produce, it means a lot of things economically and politically and everything else. And you can also see that everyone from the West, from other countries, they're all looking and having their eyes on Africa as well. So it's a very interesting time to be here in Africa and be part of all the development that is happening and future opportunities that might come up to see this continent, and in particular Rwanda, moving forward as a developed country. That's what is making me stay here, and of course enjoy the great climate and great people, food. Yeah, so it's just a lively atmosphere here back home.
Wow, thank you again, Stella, for sharing your experience with everyone. And I hope that hearing her story for some people was inspiring or thought-provoking or relatable. Before I close this episode, I wanted to share some of the feedback that I've been receiving privately and publicly on Twitter and in different messaging apps from listeners to the show. First of all, thank you very much. I'm so overwhelmed by the overall positive response that this podcast has received. I'm very moved by the comments that we've gotten, and I'll do my best to make the show bigger and better in upcoming seasons. So the responses that really stood out to me, first of all, was hearing from Africans who don't have the returnee experience, who've lived here their whole lives and are still enjoying the show, still enjoying hearing about another perspective. I was really happy to hear that. I didn't want this show to seem like it was just targeting one small group. I just wanted to show that the experience of being an African, especially today, is so multifaceted and so complex, and that there's so many different stories to be told. Another great comment that I received privately was from a young person that is, he has one parent that is African and another parent that is European, and he did grow up in Africa, but he could still very much relate to the experience of not being completely certain about his identity as an African, or attending events or being part of different family activities and feeling like he didn't quite fit in. It should have been obvious that this is an experience that would be relatable, to people who have that background, but somehow I still didn't see that coming, and it really opened my eyes to, how do I put this, another challenging experience that I didn't think too much about before. Sometimes you don't think about things unless you've lived through it or someone close to you has lived through it. So I really appreciated that message. The last bit of feedback that I got from at least 3 listeners was that the shows are too short. So I guess that's it's a good thing to hear that people want to hear more. The reason I had made the shows about 10 minutes long each was I guess it was probably just based on my own personal preference. I really enjoy short podcasts because I have a very busy lifestyle. I work from home, and while I also take care of my toddler, so I appreciate shows which I can listen to, I can just sit down, I have 10 minutes to spare, I can sit down and listen to it, as opposed to longer podcasts, which sometimes I just never get to finish because I keep starting them over, and I get interrupted somehow, and then I kind of forget about it. So that's why I made them so short, but I do appreciate that some people prefer longer podcasts. So what I'll be doing to address this is for episodes that were particularly popular, I'm going to start doing part twos. I'll try and get those guests to come back and answer some more questions, and I'll try to announce it in advance so that listeners can tell me what they would like to hear from those guests, and then offer it as an option that you can listen to both parts at once if you want a nice chunky episode. So yes, thank you again as always for all your feedback. I'll do my best to take it all in, and please know that I read all the messages, all the comments, and yeah, like I said before, I've just been overwhelmed and so touched by the response so far, and I'll do my best to live up to all the great expectations everyone has for this show. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the show, please share it and feel free to post a review. And of course, remember to subscribe. I do hope you can join us for the next episode of the Returnee Report.